Okay, so now I'm just looking at my model and I'm feeling like I probably need to go back and adjust a few of the locations of where these branches are going to extrude from based on the concept. I think I probably got a little bit ahead of myself with trying to chamfer everything at once, and I need to vary up the locations of some of these extrusion points. So I'm just going to take a look here and figure out where I can maybe vary some of these spots or locations and move them around a little bit. Now, actually, this is kind of good because this will give me a good opportunity to demo some of the quick poly optimizing tools that come packaged in with these graphite modeling tools. So right now I'm going to use P-Connect just to try and get rid of some of these chamfers that I already put in there. And then I can use the P-Connect and the Cut tool to quickly add my topology back into this spot so that I can later move this over. And eventually I'll be able to put a new chamfer location in here. Pardon me, this is behaving kind of strangely. I'll give this one more shot here. Okay, the Cut tool doesn't seem to like my new geometry, so we can use another technique for this. We'll go to Edge Selection mode, make a selection, hit Connect, and then I can quickly target weld my vertices back over to just recreate my quads for that extrusion point. It appears that my rotation axis is kind of wonky. Alright, so we'll just pull out these extra edges here. Select those very quickly and remove. And let's quickly switch back to a front view and try to round out this geometry a little bit. Let's bring it back to its original form. Now I think what I'm going to want to do is, rather than having that extrusion point, and there we go. That's why it wasn't allowing me to do my cut before, because I have a few stray vertices here. You can always tell when you start to get a couple of funny shading errors there that you may have a few stray vertices lying around. So easily just go and weld those over, and then from there I can go on and try to add my new extrusion point based on where I've created my spline here. So I'm not going to move it over too much, but I'm going to want it to come out of the side of the branch rather than directly from the top, as I did with a few of those other ones. So I'm just going to select one of these vertices that are slightly over to the side there, and then I'm going to go ahead and chamfer it just like I did before with the other ones, and then go use my target weld a couple of these vertices over. And that should be a good point to extrude my branch next. So now I'm going to select my spline, and I'm going to hit Effect Pivot Only and center my pivot to the spline so I can just move it over and rotate it to a slightly more natural angle for when I begin extruding it from the branch. So that looks okay to me. So now I'm going to go and select my polygon. I'm going to hit Polygons, Extrude on Spline, and add a couple more segments because I have that little twist at the end. So I'm going to want to put a few segments in there so I can at least get the curl of the twist. Adjust the taper and the curve a little bit and collapse the end. And I feel like I have a few too many loops in here, so I'm just going to use my key connect and quickly go in and remove about half of these loops, except for the curl at the end there. And that looks to be okay. So I think, let me just take a look at my concept again. Yeah, I think I'm going to want to move the location for this next one as well. Now I can try another method to do this that might be a little bit faster. I'll go back in and use my key connect tool, hold control, draw a line in, and then I'm going to go and turn off key connect, select my two unwanted vertices, and then hit weld. And if I turn up the weld threshold, bang, it should just pull them right in together and weld them. And that should be enough for my purposes. So now I'm just going to want to vary the location of this next branch. I'll keep it on top of the branch, but I think I'll move it over ever so slightly, just to make it look a little more natural, a little more organic. So I'll give this chamfer some room, because I want this branch to be a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to hit chamfer, as before, and scale the amount out to make a nice shape for my base branch. And that looks to be good. So once again, target weld my vertices over. And then I'm going to actually, I think I'm going to go and just quickly connect these two vertices together to hold some of that form. And then back in my front view, I'm going to jump back over to freeform. I'm going to select my shape and just give it a second. And select my object. The freeform tools should take just a moment to pop up. There they go. Sometimes it takes a little while for it to think. So the freeform tools take a few seconds to pop up. Let me see here, where's my shape? And interestingly, I'm not sure where my shape has gone. For some strange reason, it seems to have jumped way the heck out into the middle of nowhere. So, I'm not sure why that happened at all. But a quick align operation, and I can align it back to my tree. And move it back into position to where it was before. That was kind of odd. Just kind of jumped away there, for no apparent reason at all. But I appear to have it back now. So I'll just go ahead and delete these strange shapes and give it another shot to draw some splines on there. And okay, something funky going on with my spline tool there. But that's okay, this gives me an opportunity to demo another quick way of making branches, which is the branch tool. The branch tool is a very neat tool. It doesn't quite give you as much control as the extrude on spline, but it is very, very fast, as you can see. You can just grab and start drawing your branches out in perspective, and it will just draw the branch perpendicular to your screen very, very quickly, and with some similar results to extrude on spline, although you can't really force it to get the exact shape that you want it to. but you can get some fairly satisfying results with it easily and quickly. I'm just going to go back and use my P-Connect to pull out some of these loops. That's the other thing with the branch tool, is it kind of adds in loops the way that it thinks that it needs them sequentially, and it usually tends to add a little more geometry or topology than you would want it to. But that's the beauty of the P-Connect tool. Just a few seconds and you can pull out some of those loops. Then you have a fairly optimized result. So now to look at where some of my other branch extrusion points are. I think I'll keep, actually no, this other major branch that I have coming from the bottom, I think I'll probably go ahead and slightly change its location as well. So P-Connect, I'll go and connect those, and then they're already selected, so I'll just turn P-Connect off, hit weld, and turn off edge constraints, get some of my shape back to the base of the branch there, and I'll just move it over ever so slightly, not too much, maybe one vertex point over, just to give it a little variety. Once again, chamfer, and target weld, get rid of some of my vertices, and then we'll see if I can't possibly use the branch tool again to get a very quick, nice looking branch growing here. And I think for the purposes of this, I might need to make that polygonal shape a little bit larger if I want to use the branch tool. Because the branch tool bases its taper amount on the shape of the originating polygon. So I'll have to try to scale up the origin of the branch, try to make it a little bit bigger, see if I can't get a nice quick branch extrusion. That looks a little bit more closely matched to the concept now. So I'll go back to my branch tool, select the polygon, and just try and draw something out that follows the shape of the concept. That looks to be not too bad, actually. I think I could try to maybe scale it up slightly. Just try to give it a little bit more size to it. So I'll deselect some of the base ones, and then I'll just scale the base portion on both axes. Just try to thicken it up ever so slightly. That looks a little bit better. Now I'll take this endpoint and I will collapse it. And then I'll just use P-Connect again and go through and remove some of this unnecessary topology. Every other loop should just about do it. Getting down to some of these more intricate bends, I might leave some of the extra loops in there, at least where it bends a little more severely. Oops. That looks okay. When I subdivide it, in the end, I should get a slightly better result. Now when I scaled it, a couple of these loops got a little bit wonky here. So I'll go to loop selection mode. And, oh pardon me, I have to be in edge mode. Go back to loop mode, select the loop, and then this time in screen view, on rotate, I'm going to just try to rotate some of these loops to fit the polyflow a little bit better. Maybe scale them locally, or perhaps on screen, just to get a little bit of an optimal result. Some of those loops that aren't quite perfect. That looks pretty satisfactory to me. I think I can move on. Looking at a few more of these branches here. Probably want to shift some of their locations around. So once again, actually I should probably save it now, as I've gone quite a bit farther. So P-Connect, oops, select the P-Connect tool and P-Connect, and then weld. Just like that. Turn off P-Connect. Look back at my concept to see the shape of the branch. And I think slightly off to the side should do it. Chamfer. This branch seems somewhat small in the concept. Just take one last look at it. Small enough, but it's kind of big. So I'll probably scale the polygon up just a little bit there. Switch back to local. And scale it out. That looks okay. Vertex mode. And target weld. Keep everything nice and in quads. Now let's see if I can't get the branch tool to do me a favor one more time. So deselect the polygon, turn over the branch, and I want to kind of zoom out every once in a while and just look at the branch in terms of the entire scope of things. Try to make sure that they feel like they're part of the same tree the way that they're growing. And also try to make sure that I'm not duplicating the same kind of shape too many times, as that would start to look unnatural. I'll give that one more shot. Usually with the branch tool, after a couple tries, you can get something that looks pretty much the way you would like it to. It's a really nice quick tool. And with a little tweaking and a little optimization, you can get a really nice, really fast result out of it. Now the other thing you'll notice is because of the way that I've been drawing these in line with the concept, most of these branches are just growing straight up and straight down, regardless of the point of where they're growing from. But later on I'm going to use some quick tools to move those branches around along the z-axis, in z-depth, just to give them a little bit more of a natural sort of growth feel. But at the moment, I'm content to let them just grow straight up and straight down. I'm going to move this location again. Same process as before. P-Connect, and then weld, and then turn off P-Connect. And actually, in this case, I don't even really need to move it. It already sort of fits the poly flow of the branch, so I'm happy with that. So I think I'm going to move this one over nearly to the side of the branch this time. Maybe even all the way over to the side, just to give it a little bit more of a variation of where it's growing from. Stagger it a little bit. And then, actually I think I'm going to change my screen view so that when I use the branch tool, I can get a little bit more of a variety in the direction right off the bat. Try to save myself a little bit of time later on. So, see if I can't get the branch tool to save me some even more time with the work that I have to do later. Just spacing out the shape of the branch once more. And see what we can do here. Go back to freeform, branches. So I have to turn off vertex selection first. Branches, And that was maybe a little bit too extreme. That's kind of cool, but not quite long enough. I think the branch needs to be a little bit longer. Try to give it some more variety here. There we go. That's pretty nice. It's a good deal better. It doesn't quite match up to the concept, but it doesn't matter. I mean, as long as you generally get the feel of the concept, it doesn't have to be perfect. This is a 2D drawing I'm working from, and the tree is actually being built in 3D space. So as long as I try to keep the overall feel of how the tree looks or feels in the concept, that's the most important thing. If I can get the essence of the tree, then the individual branches are eventually going to change anyways. Because things may look aesthetically pleasing in 2D, but once you get into a 3D environment, they stop looking quite as aesthetically pleasing from all angles. So you can't really be a complete stickler when working from concept. You just have to go with the flow. I'm just going to use soft selection here to try and match it up a little bit. My fall off is rather high right now, selecting a whole portion of the trunk, so I'm just going to crank my fall off way down and just see if I can't shift the direction of this branch a little bit already. And then I can move it around some more later. There we go. That was easy enough. And starting to get a more and more natural look to where these branches are growing out of the tree. And I'm happy with where it's at right now, so I'm going to say it again. Almost every time, when you think to yourself, I'm happy with this, I like where it's at the moment, that's probably the best time to save. Because if you don't, sometimes, especially when you're working with new tools that you're not fully comfortable with yet, sometimes you can get crashes. You might press a button or do something that you're not completely aware of exactly how that's going to affect it, and Max may not like it, and it might just decide to shut down and say, hey, you're not allowed to do that, even if you weren't entirely aware that you weren't allowed to do that. So a good rule of thumb, think to yourself, I'm happy, and that's a good time to save. Just adding one of the larger branches here. This process is working pretty good for me. The T-connect to target weld, or rather weld, then chamfer and target weld. And then the branch tool in the end, just to get my branches growing out of there. Back to the branch tool. Now you'll notice too that these branches at the moment, actually I want to try to show you one other feature here. You can actually adjust the amount that the branches sort of taper. So you can make them taper less or more depending on your branch taper option over here in the drop-down menu for PolyDraw. Right now, however, if I try to go above 1, because of the scale of my scene, it seems to be a little bit too much, and it starts tapering in reverse. And I'm not exactly sure what just happened there. This might be one of those instances that I mentioned before where you want to save. It appears as though trying to increase the amount of taper on that branch broke Max. So I have a feeling it's about to crash because it's not letting me click on anything at the moment. So if it does, it's just thinking right now. It does decide to go ahead and crash. I just saved it, and yep, there we go. So at least that's a good illustration of my point. You should always save when you're happy with where your project is at. I went to adjust the amount of taper for the branch tool, and it crashed Max. So that was really quite a good illustration to my point about trying to save when you're happy with where something's at. As I lost probably less than a minute worth of work there. So all told, I can't really complain. I lost a minute worth of work, and I illustrated my point. So I'm happy with that. So now we'll just go back and try to add this branch one more time. I will target weld these points over, keep things in quads, as per usual, and slide out my vertices to get the shape looking a little bit nicer. And now we will go back, take a look at the branch tool one more time, and make sure that my taper is not huge. So I got my taper at a negative 0.9 right now. That tends to be, based on the scale of my scene, the only amount of taper that I can really do without angering Max. So I'll just stick with that, rather than have it try and crash on me again. Try to get this branch working one more time. Do something that I like. Nope. How about this way? Look at it from the front view, and that's somewhat closely matched the concept. I can tweak it around a little bit later. Maybe pull out some of the topology, or so I have to turn off my branch tool there. Adjust things around, use soft selection and such. Maybe I'll go ahead and do a little bit of that right now. With edge constraints turned off, of course. If I do it with edge constraints turned on, I will start to get some really strange looking stuff happening. My fall off is a little bit high, so I'll just crank it down a little bit. What's that? It's about 5. I'll bring it down, right down to about 2. Just even the shape out a little bit more. And see if I can't move it in 3D space to get a little nicer sort of shape going on. Try that one more time with the fall off turned up a little bit higher. And now the other tool, which I'll probably use somewhat later on to try to adjust these branch shapes, is also the shift tool, which I showed you before in the freeform tools. That tool can also work quite well for just nudging overall topology around and trying to shape things out a little bit more. But for now, I'm content to use the fall off tool, or the soft selection tool. Can't spend too long on this, so I'll move on to my next branch shape. Save it once again. The branches, especially at the top here, I really feel as though I need to try to move those shapes around. So I'm just going to switch to edge mode, edge selection mode, turn off soft selection, and just try to remove this inset that I created before. Where's my remove button? There it is. Appears that I still have a few vertices left. So a quick way to do that again is just to use P-Connect, hold Alt, and click. And you can easily remove some geometry that way. So now looking back at my concept, I think this larger branch, I would actually like to grow a little bit more out of the side of this stump here. So I'll turn off P-Connect. Just try to shape this out a little bit more to make it more accommodating for my inset operation. That seems to be a little bit nicer. Just going to want to smooth out this poly flow. And try to shape, with edge constraints on, just try to shape out the area where I'm going to inset the branch. Now, this is the largest branch in the concept, so I'm going to want to give it some space. Try to round it out a little bit. Based on the concept, that looks okay to me. So now, in fact, it may not even be necessary to inset it because of the fact that I've insetted the other two branches over there. I might actually just be able to go ahead, remove these edges in here, and try to use the branch tool to just draw my branch right out from here. This should work in theory. I haven't tried to draw a branch this big using the branch tool before. Interesting. Okay, so it seems as though the branch tool decided that it wanted to make Max crash again. So that's fine. No big deal there. I just went ahead and reopened it. I had it saved again, so no big deal. Didn't lose too much. That's one thing I guess you're going to want to do, as it appears that this branch tool can be slightly buggy. It does save you a lot of time, but probably just a good idea, a rule of thumb, to save fairly often until maybe Max releases some sort of a patch or a hot fix to get all those issues completely sorted out. In the meantime, yeah, probably just going to want to save fairly often. Anyways, all I did was I went and I drew another spline here because I figure for the shape of this branch, it's really large and rather complex. So I'm just going to try to extrude on spline for that one. So I'm just going to go ahead back to polygon mode and select my extrusion surface, then go back to polygons, extrude on spline, pick my spline, and once again, this is a really nice feature. I like both of them a lot. I like branch and extrude on spline. I think branch has less practical uses other than just drawing branches and weird kind of shapes like that. I think extrude on spline could be used in a lot more situations than just the one that's being demonstrated here. Okay, it appears to have done a very narrow sort of extrusion there, and I think that's most likely because of the orientation of the spline compared to the orientation of the face. I should probably try to make the spline a little bit more perpendicular to the direction of the polygon, the way that it's facing. So I'm just going to rotate it, line it back up, try to get it to be a little bit more perpendicular there, and see if I can't maybe move some of these vertices around using soft selection to get a little bit more of a natural flow. I'll just crank up my fall off here. Select the end and just nudge them over. And that actually seems like it's going to give me a really cool looking flow to the growth of the branch. So actually that should work out pretty nice. I'll just give it one more attempt at extruding here. Select it. My polygons should still be selected, and they are. Extrude on spline. And yeah, the thickness appears to be a lot nicer, a lot more full and rounded out. So I'm fairly happy with that. Just collapse the end down as usual. Make it into a point. I don't think I have time to go through and try to optimize all these branches right now, so I'll just keep that one as is. Save it again. So I got a nice looking branch there that I'm happy with. And moving on to the next branch. I think that I will shift one of these branches over. I think I'll leave one of them where they are, in the center. That should be okay. I'll shift this middle branch over somewhat. So I'll just make a selection here of the edges I want to remove. Hold Control and click Remove. And I need to go through and remove these extra vertices, but that's easy enough with P-Connect. Done and done. So now I'll just shift my selection over somewhat. Got to turn off P-Connect. I always forget to do that. It's one of those tools that doesn't turn off automatically. You have to tell it that you want it to turn off. So that part takes a little bit of getting used to. But otherwise, it's a very quick and efficient and useful tool. One of my favorites. Almost endless sort of applications, especially when it comes to optimizing your geometry. It's such a huge time saver. I'm just kind of shaping out the area for this branch here. That looks good to me. So I'll give it an inset. And then turn off Edge Constraint Mode. Go to Screen Space. And just pull it out a little bit. That looks good to me. So what kind of branch are we working with here? I think this one should be okay with the branch tool. Yeah, it should be alright. So I'll see if I can't use the branch tool to help me to do that. Switch back to P-Connect and just get rid of the central vertex. The branch tool will only draw polygons or branches from a single polygon at a time. So at the point when you're drawing it, you have to delete your interior geometry. You may start off with an n-gon, but it's all going to collapse down to a single point in the end. So that part doesn't really matter. It just matters that you have one polygon to start off the branch with. That started out kind of weird, so let's see if I can't do that again. A little bit more perpendicular to my screen. And it doesn't quite seem to understand what that polygon wants to do. So here's a good chance to use that Make a Planar tool. That Make a Planar just turned that polygon into one flat sort of shape. That should help the branch tool to recognize what it's trying to do a little bit more. So we'll give this one more attempt there. And that looks a little bit better. See if I can't get a little bit cooler of a shape going here. I'll stop with that. It actually sort of lines up to the concept fairly nicely. But for adjusting it, I'm going to need to pull out some of this additional geometry. I'll just collapse the end down. In this case, I sort of need to because I'm going to want to adjust it. I'm not fully happy with its position. And if I try to do that with all this extra geometry in there, it's going to be a little bit too much. It's not going to give me the kind of control that I want when I try to use soft selection or any of these other tools to move the geometry around. So just pull out some of that stuff. Looks good to me. And I'm going to make a selection here. Turn on soft selection. And soft selection actually works on all of your tools. It doesn't just work on your move tools or anything else. It also works on your scale tool, some of these various other tools, which could be kind of neat because you can scale some parts and then just have a gradual fall off to the other parts that are effective when you're scaling it. And that can be really neat and really useful as well. So I definitely like soft selection, especially when you're dealing with organic things like trees and other things like that. It's usually a much better way to go. I don't tend to use soft selection very often when I'm working with hard surface modeling or anything like that, because hard surfaces are hard, they're not soft, and soft selection would sort of be counterproductive to that. So once again, happy with that branch. I've got one more major branch to go, and the roots, and then I can move on to some of these smaller secondary branches. So once again, I'm going to see if I can use the branch tool to do this for me. Turn on P-Connect, delete my central vertex, and then I'm going to jump the gun here because of the little problem I had last time. I'm just going to select that face and hit Make a Planar right now. Just try to beat the branch tool to the punch with that one. So now, taking care of that, we jump back over to Freeform, Branches, and see what I can get going on here. And I don't quite like what it's doing for me. It seems to be tapering far too much for the thickness of this branch. So in this case, I'm actually going to see if I can maybe use that freeform spline tool that I was using before. Now, freeform spline can be rather finicky at times. So I'm going to see what other existing shapes I have out here. Select that. Okay. So I do have another shape floating around. So go back to my spline tool. And it does not appear to want me to draw right now. So I'll select my shape, my existing shape, delete it out of the scene, just to make sure there's no confusion here. And then try to get my spline tool back again. It doesn't appear to want to let me draw. So in this case, since it's being finicky at the moment, normally I would go through and sort of troubleshoot that, but I don't quite have the time to do that at the moment. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the old-fashioned line tool. And it should actually work just fine for my purposes in this case. So I don't really mind too much. So now I've got my spline shape. It's actually already pretty perpendicular to where I'm going to want to be extruding it from. But I'm just going to position it a little bit in Z-space using soft selection. Just nudge it over. Try to get it growing in a little bit more interesting of a direction. And then turn off soft selection. And just make sure that my base point is still growing perpendicular to the extrusion surface, which it appears to be. Okay, so let's just make sure our spline is touching it there. And we'll go back, select our extrusion surface, and go polygon, extrude on spline, fix spline, and I'm going to turn down the taper amount and the taper curve this time, because this branch tends to be a little bit thicker. I'm also going to turn down the number of segments, because it's not quite as big of a branch. Say OK, and collapse the end down. That branch looks okay for me.